This legislative session, lawmakers are considering a number of bills on family planning. That is an issue. It is one of the priorities for Alliance for a Better Utah. Lauren Simpson is the policy director for that organization. She's here now to go into greater detail. Lauren, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start off with family planning. That is a big issue that you guys are working on. And one of the bills, which was held in committee during the week for fiscal note purposes, is being sponsored by Senator Derek Kitchen, family planning. Talk to us about what that would do and what you guys like about that.
Yeah, so what we like about it is it would provide increased contraceptive access to low-income Utahns. So really it's about, at the end of the day, empowering people to start their families at a time that's right for them, and especially for people who right now might not be able to afford those kinds of contraceptives. And this is something that has passed, but was kind of rolled into the legislature's repeal and replace of Prop 3. But it's something that we've definitely seen support before, so we're really hopeful that there will be that same support this time around.
It also does something very important. As you mentioned, this is handled through the Medicaid program in the state. Currently, those who qualify are at 98% or below the poverty level. This would increase that to 250%, to my understanding. So that would really increase this program for a lot of Utahns here in our state.
Right, and as we've seen, there are a lot of people who, you know, might not qualify for Medicaid, but are still really struggling to make it by. And so I think anything that we can do to support these people, especially in something so fundamental, like when is the right time to start my family, that's a choice that we just really want everybody to be empowered to have to make the decision that's right for them and their family.
And when you talk about family planning services, people might bring abortion into that conversation. This bill specifically says abortion is not part of this family planning services in this bill.
Yeah, it's just for contraceptives. And really, policies like this are actually what tends to reduce abortion overall, because when you have these long-lasting contraceptives, that reduces unplanned pregnancies or unintended pregnancies in a big way.
Another bill you guys are watching is paid parental leave by Representative Waite. I've done a story on this with her. Met with her during the week, and she was saying she's kind of making some changes to that. Not sure exactly what those are, but the premise of that bill that you guys are backing, go into that for us.
Yeah, so this bill for some state employees, it would give 6 weeks of paid leave. And honestly, as a new parent and as somebody who's watched this for a long time, like, this is a bill that will really make a big difference to people who are, you know, struggling with the financial burden of taking care of a new child, and also the emotional burden of not having to stress about some of that income. So they'll be able to take 6 weeks paid and add on to that 6 weeks of unpaid leave, which state employees already can do under FMLA.
We're seeing this conversation really across the country. Lawmakers in DC, here in Utah, are concerned about men and women having to choose between a family and a career. So this is for state employees. Is this something that you guys would like to see really across the board, even go into the private sector as well, eventually?
Yeah, and to give due credit, we've really seen our private sector, especially the tech sector, I think really nudge Utah in the right direction in terms of the parental leave policies that they offer. This is obviously something that in the long run we'd love to see for everybody, but I think the state kind of has to take a stand and be willing to, you know, stand up for working families and make progress in that area.
Well, that's one of the points Representative Waite made as well, is that the state's kind of lagging behind and perhaps missing out on talented employees because they can go get that in other areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to another very important issue. Couples who struggle to have children. Very emotional for them. There's a bill that would require insurances to cover IVF. Talk about that.
Yeah, and this wouldn't apply to everybody, but it would, you know, for certain health conditions, after 5 years, after, you know, you've tried some less invasive measures, it would require your insurance to cover IVF. And for anyone who's ever struggled to have a child or knows someone who struggled to have a child, you know, what an emotional burden that is, and also what a financial burden that is. And I think anything, again, it just comes back to anything we can do to empower people to be able to have the families that they want to have is a great move for a family-friendly state like Utah.
Yeah, I caught up with Representative Stoddard, who's sponsoring that bill, and he was a bit concerned about the fiscal note, but said, if anything else, it's a conversation starter. Some of these bills that we've talked about here are probably an uphill battle, but do you like at least getting them on the radar and moving forward from here?
Absolutely. And these conversations are things that ordinary Utahns are talking about all the time. So, this isn't anything new that the legislature's starting to talk about it. Really, they're just catching up. And, if we really want to support families in a systemic way, that takes money. And right now, individual families are bearing that cost burden. But I think for the state to show up and support families, it's going to cost some money, and we're fine with that.
Let's move into abortion. We passed an 18-week ban last year. Now some lawmakers are looking to build on that. One would be a virtual ban on abortion. Another would require a mother to get an ultrasound before an abortion. You guys stand opposed to those bills. Why?
We do, really for the same reasons. We just really support people's individual agency to make the choices that are right for them and their families. And I really believe we can trust families, we can trust women to make good decisions. We know through some state polling, a majority of Utahns actually support Roe v. Wade. A lot of times on these bills, especially these really extreme bills, you hear some really loud voices, but I think most people, while they might not think that that's a decision that they would make for themselves, they recognize that there's some pretty compelling personal circumstances that might, somebody might make a different decision than they would, and that's okay. We can give them the space to have that agency and make that choice.
Last year's bill, working its way through the courts, we're seeing cases all across the country in the courts. Senator McKay's bill would be a trigger bill, meaning that if the courts weighed in on it, then it would kick in. So what's wrong with having that there and ready to go if the courts ultimately do decide that that is a state's right?
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't want to live in a place with a virtual ban on abortion. I don't want people to not have that option. And I think when you talk to people, when you have individual conversations one-on-one about what that actually means, even though it's a decision that some people might not make for themselves, we recognize that's a really personal decision that women should make with their partner, with their doctor, with their faith, if they're a person of faith. It's just a really personal decision. And if Utah wants to support families, there are great systemic ways to do that. Let's do increased contraceptive access. Let's, better educate our kids about healthy sexual relationships. Let's support families economically with the burden of having a child. But to punish women for a really personal choice isn't the way to do it.
Okay, I wanted to get into education funding, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Where can our viewers learn more about you and your organization?
BetterUtah.org.
Okay, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate having you with us.
Thanks so much.
Stay with